Hello everybody, this is niclas.huschenbeth and welcome to the fourth Patron game analysis live stream in which I'm analyzing the games of my supporters from Patreon. So today we have 3 games and I'll get right to them, but before that, this is niclas.huschenbeth and welcome to... I need to mute the sound for one. Beginner's mistake. And for the other, of course, I want to welcome you guys, and I'll wait for a little bit so more people can triple in. And hi to Abdallah and hi to Timon, who are already in the chat. And Kevin is also there. We're gonna start with your game, Kevin, right away in just a moment. And Multi-Scrime from the Czech Republic is also here. Hello, welcome. And also, before I begin my stream, I would like to take a chance to thank my supporters for, well, not only the ones whose games I'm analyzing today, but also some other people. So I would like to do that right now. So let's begin with Mr. Ian Lamb. Thank you for supporting me already for a few months now, and I hope you're watching right now. We'll get to your game later. Then we have Mario Guevara Rodriguez. We'll also see a game of yours, so I'm looking forward to that one. Definitely. Thank you for your support. Then we have Dusty. I'm not sure if this is your actual name, but I don't know your actual name, so that's all I can call you. Dusty, thank you for helping me, and if you want any game analysis or anything, just let me know. I haven't heard from you yet, but thank you in case you're watching. And Kevin, of course, one of my longest, no, the longest, my longest supporter, Kevin. Thank you, and I hope I can once again deliver some value to you with this game analysis today. And then Park Song Bing, also thank you very much, my friend, for supporting me and helping me to play tournaments around the world and getting closer to my goal of the top 100. All right, I think we can begin. Thomas is also here, and Diogo, am I saying that right? All right, now let's begin. And Kevin, as I said, I'll begin with your game. This is not quite looking right yet. What happened here? When I checked this the last time, it looked correct. Hold on. Ah, there we go. Okay, I fixed that. It wasn't too hard. Okay. All right. Now, the first game, my friends, is the game O'Connor, I should say, against Kevin. And Kevin was playing with the black pieces, so we'll see it from his point of view. And let's begin. And Kevin, just to let you know, I for some reason had some difficulties loading the analyzed version into my program I'm using, so I sometimes have to switch back and forth checking my analysis. So sometimes I might need to take some time just to check that I'm not forgetting anything that I want to mention, okay? Just so you know. All right, so we have this orthodox Queen's Gambit decline line, which is very solid. I don't know much about it. I do know that a6 is not one of the main moves, but you're saying so here yourself, and you just want to get your opponent into unfamiliar positions or lines. Now knight h5, bishop d3. Here, it's okay that you're waiting, but here I guess you could just take on f4 first and then play b6 next, not to allow him this option of going knight e5, what happened in the game, right? So it's usually a good idea to limit the options of your opponent if you can. right? By playing knight takes f4 first and then going b6, now your opponent doesn't have that option anymore, knight e5, because, well, it could take on e5, probably it could take on d4. It just doesn't work. Okay, so, and you're also writing this here. So b6, there was no necessity to give him this additional option, knight e5. You saw it, but and you evaluate it as fine for you, but why give him this option in the first place, right? Knight e5, knight takes, and bishop takes h7 is interesting here. I looked at this a little bit because first I thought you're playing for white pieces, but it seems it's not much for white either. Bishop takes, g6, and now your opponent makes an inaccuracy, allows you to get the bishop pair. That was the whole idea of the knight h5 maneuver, so that's all good. And here writing the pair of bishops does offset the weak black king position. However, I didn't trust the position was open enough for the two bishops and didn't want to expose my king any further with the e6, e5 break. I still have a hard time assessing this. Alright, so that's correct. You don't necessarily want to go e5 because it would open up your king further. But the bishop pair can shine in the long run. And we'll see some things that you could have done here. I think, like you're saying, queen d6 is good. Centralizing a queen before playing bishop d7. Now rook fc1. Bishop d7 is also fine, developing knight a4. Now bishop takes a4 I don't like at all, because from that point forward you're just fighting for a draw. It's a play for two results, but for you it's draw or loss, right? And that's not the kind of position you want to be in, and there was no necessity to be in this situation in the first place. So in this position of the knight a4, white is actually not even threatening anything right now. You could play a move like f5. And I think this move makes a lot of sense. You're stopping any kind of e4 from white for a long future. And there's this plan maybe to play h5, h4 and slowly try to open up the white king position. And white can't really do much. Okay, first of all, of course, queen takes b6 fails to bishop takes a4, and knight takes b6. You just play rook b8 and pick up the knight. So that doesn't work. There's nothing there for white. So what else can white do? Well, probably double the rooks, but okay, now you can support the pawn, rook c1, and now what? You can go for this plan, play h5, h4, then white has to take on h4, and maybe later on you can advance further with the pawns. Of course, you always have to be careful, but it's also going to be interesting what white is going to do, because rook c7 looks nice, but you just push out the rook. It doesn't help white in any manner. So I would absolutely keep the bishop pair, because like I said, you're just fighting afterwards for a draw with no chances, really no chance for winning. I mean, this is just my personal approach. I wouldn't like to be in a situation, whereas here, of course, the position is rather equalish, but they're still all results, and I would prefer black definitely, because I'm really having a hard time to come up with a plan for white, really. Whereas, like I said, you can try h4 and then just see what happens there. Take, bishop takes, and maybe use the h-file in the long run. All right, so let's go back here. Bishop takes, queen takes, b5, queen c2, and now queen d7 is a mistake. I would say you're making it hard on yourself, definitely. You're allowing white to enter on c7 with tempo. You have to immediately react to the threat to your queen. I think a move that makes a lot of sense is to play king f7. You're bringing the king closer already to the center in case an endgame emerges. You're also protecting his pawn on g6 just in case. I mean, I know it wasn't really a threat besides a threat of making a draw for white, but it doesn't hurt to have the king on f7. It feels quite safe. And now if queen c7, you could just play a move like rook fd8. And if white now takes on d6, you just take back with the bishop. Or you could also just play a move like f5 here. I mean, either one. And what is white going to do to improve his position? I mean, it still feels a little bit uncomfortable, to be honest. After like rook c6, let's say, takes. Because white does have this active rook on the 7th rank, but this should be possible to hold this, certainly. Okay, so queen d7, but now this is coming with tempo, right? Okay, now rook fd8, rook c6, yeah, I'm wondering actually if in this other line after rook c6 here, if maybe it's possible to go queen d8. But now probably rook c1 nonetheless. Yeah, not that simple. Not that simple, unfortunately. Okay, back to the game. Queen c7, rook fd8, rook c6, now king f7. Rook c1, takes. And I think you're doing a good job here defending. And I think this all works out pretty well. How you're doing this here, forcing the endgame with the opposite color bishops, obviously. White has won a pawn, but you have taken the rooks off the board, and it is a dead draw here. So we'll look into this in a second. I'll just check my notes real quick if I've missed anything. Oh yeah, I did miss something I want to say. Okay, check this. Here in this position, king e8 is a slight inaccuracy. Once again, this move f5 makes a lot of sense. You're stopping for one e4 and for the other g4, and after king e8, this g4 move would have been unpleasant for you because white is fixing a weakness here on h7, and this might be a problem later on. So you need to look out for the white options pretty much, and making sure you can't fix any of your pawns as weaknesses. I mean, if you play f5 now, he could even go g5, and then it's obvious that this pawn is a weakness. So this is what I want to point out. Is there anything else that I forgot to point out? Let's see. All right, now we'll get to the end game right here. And you're asking, how should I play this, right? I don't know what the plan is to assure a draw here. Should I place my pawns on dark squares or light squares, lock position up, or trade everything, create a passed pawn to prevent any further white passed pawns? Okay, let's get to one question after another. Usually, and of course, there are always exceptions to these rules. Usually in opposite colored bishop endgames, you want to place the pawns on the same color as your bishop because that means the other bishop can't attack them and you can defend them with your bishop. That can sometimes have drawbacks because it allows the opponent's king to invade on the opposite color of your bishop, because those squares obviously cannot be covered by your bishop. But usually that's the strategy. Here though, you already have several pawns on the light squares, and that's fine. They're not weak, right? The base is e6 and you can easily defend that right now. And the other base is h7 and there's no way white can attack that. So I think the strategy of f5 would have been best. But first let me answer your other questions. Should I lock the position up or trade everything? Well, in this case I think you can just lock it up, because white cannot make any progress on the queen side. Whenever, let's say, the king comes to c3, it's a little bit too many errors right now, then you just play bishop a5 check and there's no way for white to make any progress there. So what can white actually do? The only way white can do anything is attached to playing f3 and e4, something of these sorts, right? So I think it makes a lot of sense to play f5, and well, white can play around whatever he wants. You'll just stay like this. Whenever a king comes to c3, you play bishop a5. And if white plays f3, you play bishop c7, keep an eye on this pawn, king f2, and now you can just wait pretty much. I mean, you can play h5 even. And obviously the white king has to keep the pawn protected. f4 would just lock everything completely up, so bishop d3, king e7, and now e4 could be just answered by taking, and maybe taking, I was thinking bishop b6, but then the pawn on g6 is still hanging, but maybe that's not a big issue. Okay. Okay, that's why actually in this position, instead of playing king e7, which I'm sure is also a draw, it's better to play g5, so that if e4, you could just take and play bishop b6 now, and winning the pawn on d4, and it's an immediate draw. Yeah, but even, I mean, also king e7 is also fine after e4. But even if you just go bishop b6 here, or take everything on e4, there's really not much I can do, if anything. So I think that was the simplest way to play this. Just go f5 and then just sit and wait. And now your last question. Should I create a passed pawn or prevent any further white passed pawn? That is a good question. You should definitely prevent white from creating further passed pawns, because your bishop can deal with one pawn, no problem. But with two pawns, it's going to be more difficult, and that's what we're going to see in the game. So it doesn't really, if you get a passed pawn, it doesn't help you that much in most cases. We'll see that in the game actually. So stop your opponent from creating more passed pawns. All right, now e5. So this is fine, but it is making maybe a test a little bit more difficult. Takes, king f1, king d6, king e2. You're saying g5 is important to play. I don't think so. Bishop a5 is completely fine. But here d4, I think this is actually a losing mistake. I think that this endgame now after d4 is lost, because white is getting another passed pawn. The pawn on e4 will be a passer after f4, which your opponent unfortunately didn't play. So I believe it is lost. Here, don't play d4. Like I said, okay, now, of course, you know that your own passed pawn doesn't mean that much. White can just stop it. So it's more important to stop your opponent from having a passed pawn. And here d takes e4. Now white cannot approach, bishop b6 check. So bishop b7. And here there would be even the option to go king c5. If now bishop takes e4, okay, just king d4, and obviously black is too active. I mean, the only plan white has, I guess, is to run over here, but now just bishop e7, or even waiting one more move until the king is on h4 and still bishop e7, not allowing the king to come in, and nothing white can do in this position. Or maybe I should do it smarter. Bishop e7 would allow a5, so just bishop a5, king h4, or here bishop e1. Okay, bishop a5, king h4, bishop d8. Okay, there are many ways, obviously. White can't do anything here. So king c5 is one way. Of course, one would need to check this move. This seems a little bit more critical. But here, king b4 is possible. If bishop c6, just bishop b6 check. And if king takes e4, picking up the pawn, bishop e1. And now the king can just come back. And it's a draw. That's not the only way to draw with king c5. I mean, this is a little bit, I guess, more forceful. Either getting the king to d4 or picking up his pawn on a4. It's also possible to play it differently, but this seemed to be the simplest way. Yeah, I'm sure bishop b6 should be also a draw. You keep an eye on this pawn. And now you see the difference, right? White didn't create a passed pawn here and shouldn't be able to. So this should result in a draw as well. So what's the problem with d4? Well, I know your opponent played g4, but if he goes f4, you're writing yourself g5, and now takes, king d3, bishop d8 should hold, assuming white can't his bishop to d3, but he can, right? He'll just go bishop c4. And now there was one accurate move white had to play. Let me see real quick. Oh yeah, so in this position after bishop b6, white should go g4, because otherwise black can go g4 himself, and in that moment, and then go after the g3 pawn, so white can go g4 himself, and then, well, black just waits and white brings the bishop to c2 and then plays king c4 and wins, right? You cannot stop both pawns. So that's the issue. And the same is true after other moves like bishop c7, same story. Same plan, bring the bishop back, And I think it's winning for white. I mean, okay, I don't know if there's some miraculous save, but I'd be surprised. In general, with these endgames, the further away the two passed pawns are from your opponent, the worse it is. Otherwise, you can still like get some fortress in, oftentimes, when both of them are on the same diagonal of the bishop. So in that case, let's say this pawn was over here, then you see how the bishop would control. Okay, it's too many arrows right now. Let's say the a4 pawn was on b5. Then the bishop would control both the e5 square as well as the b8 square. It might be a different story. But here you see the bishop cannot control both pawns. And also, of course, it is getting more complicated since there are more pawns on the board. Okay. All right. So your opponent played g4, king c5. But now, yeah, g5, you find the right idea here, just stopping this, putting the pawns on the dark squares, and this is simply a draw. Now a lot of moves were made. Yeah, I wasn't sure why you didn't go back to c5 here. That seemed to be simpler, but it doesn't make a difference. Okay, king takes d4 leads to the same line pretty much. King d6, okay. And you found this drawing idea here. Yeah, creating a wrong pawn for the opponent, very nice. And now it's a draw, dead draw, because black can just give the bishop for this pawn and will keep his king on h8, and white has the wrong bishop, cannot ever get this king out on h8, and it's a draw even though white is up a pawn and the bishop. All right, so I think some important lessons here for you to take from this game. Definitely have a look at opposite colored bishop endgames. And I just read a really good book that I can recommend, not on this particular endgame, but on endgames in general. It's called 100 Endgames You Must Know by Jesus de Avila. And it's a very light read. It's not that thick. It's just 100 endgame positions. And he covers all the basics. And it's really useful because if you have those fundamentals down, that will help you even if there are more pieces on the board. So he goes really from the basic positions starting, like for example a position like this one where it says, okay, if you have the king in the right corner, so in front of the right pawn, then it's obviously a simple draw. If the king was over here, then obviously white would be winning because the king would run over, promote this pawn, and then it is the right bishop for this pawn, right? So that's a book I would recommend you to read. It will definitely help you with your endgames, and to everybody else watching out there, I recommend to everybody. It helped me a lot, even though of course I knew a lot of positions already, but still to refresh my memory and also to get these rules and rules of thumb again explained to me was just helpful, and I'll periodically review them because I think it's unnecessary to lose points just because you don't have this knowledge of basic endgames, pretty much of positions that arise again and again, or are likely to arise again and again in your own games. So other than that, I mean, that's certainly what I noticed the most with this, that you were struggling to hold a draw in this what shouldn't be difficult in this endgame. And other than that, your decision bishop takes a4 stuck out to me. That's the right word, not stuck out to me. because you're condemning yourself to defense for the rest of the game, and that's just, it's not necessary, right? I mean, I don't think it's fun for you, right? And you don't have to do that in that particular position. Believe in the power of the bishop pair. I feel like I repeat this in every stream, and even though it might seem in the particular position that the bishop pair is not that useful because position is closed, oftentimes it can go from a closed position to an open position. So keep that in mind, and you never know when the bishop pair will eventually shine. So let me check the chat if you had any questions. Oh, very nice. Great. Awesome. Kevin says he has the book in front of him already. Well, that's very good. Very good. Okay, great. All right, so that's what I would say about this game. The opening, let me see, the opening was fine. I think everything was fine. I mean, except for your decision with knight takes f4 to delay that, but okay, it's a minor thing. Yeah, and then in the endgame, maybe paying a little bit more attention to your opponent's options, but okay, it wasn't really that much. Just this one move g4, where your opponent could claim more space and could have stopped it with f5. All right, thanks for sending it in. Thanks for the support, Kevin. I hope that was helpful, and let me know if you have any questions. Off to the next game, and we'll do the game by King Hunter. And King Hunter was playing with the black pieces. All right, so game number 2, King Hunter with the black pieces. Let's begin. And I like this opening, the Nimzo, very nice. But King Hunter, it looks like you haven't watched my opening series on it on Chess24. Otherwise, you'd know that in this position, black needs to do something in the center, either go d5 or c5, because right now white does have a threat, and you are not stopping this threat. You're playing b6, which is very typical in Nimzo, to go bishop b7, develop the bishop, and take control of the light squares in the center. But b6 is neglecting the threat, which is e4. If white plays e4 here, he's just clearly better already, claiming a lot of space, and you're one move too slow with bishop b7, right? So you need to do something else here. Either you can go d5, or what I play is the move c5. So I'd recommend to you to look into either one. c5 is a little bit, I say, more dynamic, and d5 is more solid. So b6, fortunately your opponent misses this chance to seize the initiative? Seize the initiative. It's such a weird word, I never know how to say it. Bishop b7, and now everything is fine. Bishop e2. And here you could have done this typical Nimzo Indian play, going in with the knight, knight e4, castle, now taking on c3 and giving white those doubled pawns on the c file, and then play with f5. I think that would have been a little bit better than what you did. Even though this is also fairly standard, d6, castle, knight b7, bishop d2, and now you take on c3. But you see the difference, right? Now white has a bishop on c3 and not a pawn, so white's pawn structure isn't weakened. Knight takes. Okay, now white decides to take with the pawn. I don't think that was necessary, but he does so. And you see, I don't have much to criticize here. You're playing all natural moves. I like your position. You have a better pawn structure. This is what I want if I'm playing a Nimzo Indian, and here a4 is another inaccurate move because white is just giving himself a weakness on a4, a pawn that can be more easily attacked in the future. Now e5 is also great, e4, and here the first moment. f4 looks nice, you're grabbing more space, but white has this maneuver which he plays with queen b3, queen b5, getting some counterplay. it was time to bring the last piece into play. The rook on a8 hasn't moved, so time to put it on e8, right? And give this pawn on e5 some more support. And also if e takes f5 now, well, I'm sure queen takes f5 would be fine, but you can also play e4. Also looks good. And just keeping your options open, right? With rook a8, you're still ready to take on e4, maybe take on d4 and threaten e4, so you keep more flexibility. Okay. I mean, technically f4 is fine, but just there's this problem of queen b3 and some counterplay here on the light squares, and that obviously wouldn't be possible if white still has to worry about the center, right? If you pawn f5, the queen couldn't go to b3, e4 would be hanging right away. Now king h8, queen b5. And yeah, now it's a little bit awkward. And you play rook fd8. I mean, this is not a move that you're dreaming of playing, since, well, the rook is fine on f8, but as you recognize, rook a8, queen c6 would be even more awkward. Queen e6 was another move, but yeah, here white is doing okay again. Having the open or occupying the d file and having enough play here. So rook fd8 is good. Rook fe1, rook c8, rook d3, and here c6 is making your life much more difficult. You know, the thing with pawns is, as you know obviously, is they cannot move backwards. And once you have moved a pawn, well, you can only move it forward. And what that means here is that the pawn on b6 will be chronically weak permanently. Right? Now, for the rest of the game, really, you have to keep protecting this pawn on b6. And you have to use either your knight or your bishop, or your rook, excuse me. And that's not a worthy task for a piece like that, right? Pawns want to protect each other. So pawn c7 was perfect, as it was the base for the pawns on d6 and b6. I understand that you didn't like the queen possibly going into c6, but okay, so what? Nothing is happening there. So instead you could have played queen e7 here, and if rook ed1, obviously there was white's intention with rook d3 to put some more pressure on the d file. Now you can just step out of it, play rook e8. And the point is, if white takes on e5, now you don't have to take with the pawn, but you just take with the knight and keep the d file closed. And obviously white's pawn structure would be absolutely horrible. So queen e7 protecting the knight on d7 and then preparing rook e8. This looks like it was the way to go here. If white takes now on e5, you could just take back and you would get this square on c5 for your knight. That would be also not advisable for white. So queen e7, prepare rook e8, and it's really a lot about prophylactic thinking here. What does my opponent want to do? He wants to go rook d1. What can I do to be able to answer that in a good way? Get my rook out of the d file so I can take on e5 with a piece. Alright, so c6, queen b2, and here queen g6, and I will say that a lot now, but I think you're just having the wrong plan. What we'll see going forward is that you're trying to attack with your pieces against the white king, and that's not enough. You will not checkmate with rook and queen. White can, as we'll see in the game, easily defend against that. You need to attack with your pawns. So get those pawns rolling. Play g5. I know it weakens your king, but you have the space advantage there, and that's fine. And sometimes even you might walk your king over. Well, actually this comes later. Here it wouldn't make that much sense yet, as the position is not closed yet. But push your pawns forward. Play g5, play h5, and claim more space. And eventually you can try to open up the position and get to the white king. This is the only plan that will work here in this position. So queen g6, knight d2. Oh yeah, actually, yeah, queen g6 is actually blundering a pawn. And that's also an issue. I'm not sure what you were intending against d takes e5. Maybe you were looking at this. But now we see exactly this problem, that you have played c6 because your knight has to keep this pawn protected. So if you take on e5, you lose the pawn on b6, just a pawn down here. And you have to do that actually, because if you take with the pawn, it's even worse, because you end up in a really, really bad pin along the d file. Queen d2, putting even more pressure on it, and we all know this doesn't look good, right? So queen g6, I guess you for a moment weren't paying attention to this move of your opponent on taking on e5. And that goes back to what I always like to emphasize at some point in the streams, looking at candidate moves, and those are always taking moves and check moves first and foremost. And here, d takes e5, you always need to check this move. For every move you play, before you play every move, rather, you gotta check, okay, what happens if he takes an e5? Is that an issue? Yes, no, and then make sure it isn't. Okay, so queen g6 gave away a pawn, but your opponent missed that. He played knight d2, rook e8, f3, rook e6. Once again, this is the wrong plan. Play queen e6, play g5, h5, g4. Rook e6, rook d1. And probably you now notice, I mean, you haven't even played rook h6, but white has already defended against it. This will just not get you anywhere. Okay, queen g6. Queen a3, and now c5. Now your opponent is very nice. He plays d5, after which he will not have any counterplay anymore at all. Because his only counterplay is really connect to his pawn, which you can always defend. And you can take all your time to build up your attack, kind of, and push the pawns forward. Rook f6, queen b2, but still, you're not doing it, right? Here you play queen g5. You should get your queen out of the way and push those pawns forward. Just go h5, queen f2, let's say, and go queen h7, queen f7, doesn't matter, and go g5. And then it will be the question. You can either take direct action, push forward, g4, rook g8, and so forth, or you could take all the time in the world and bring your king over to c7, which would be a perfect square because protecting b6, the king is safe here, far away from the action. On the other hand, that would probably allow your opponent to do the same. So not quite sure, maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe you should just go as quickly as possible, go for g5, g4, and play rook g8, and then you have options to either go g3 or take on f3 and so forth. And that's the only way to do this if you want to crack through the white position. Okay. Yeah, here just nothing's happening, right? I mean, this is just not getting you anywhere. You need to push the pawns. It's the only way. You see it right now yourself, probably. Nothing is going on there. You just... Okay, now you're doing it. Rook a8, of course. You notice the white threat, knight takes a5. Very nice. Okay, and this is a big mistake, h4. Because now this means that you won't have any chance anymore to open a position. White plays h3, and you don't have any way to open a position anymore, right? Your only way to break through was going g5, g4, and now this will never be possible. White will just take. And unless you sacrifice a piece, you won't break through, and well, in most cases, piece sacrifice won't work. So h4 is a big mistake, since then the position is just locked, right? You should go rook h6, and once again, same plan as always. You've heard it already many times, and I'm sure you'll remember after this game for the future, very sure, after I've emphasized it so much. So h4, I guess you had h3 in mind, which would be nice if you can get it in, but it's your opponent's move. He sees it, he stops it, and then all you play is over. Of course, the rook looks nice on g3, but in the end, it's not doing anything. White's position is super safe now. So the rest of the game we can go through pretty quickly. Okay, here's actually the end. Here, by the way, you play rook takes g3. I mean, it doesn't matter, but still, I think h takes would be better, because white's only possibility to do something would be to sacrifice the exchange, and then you rather want to have a pawn on g3, so that if you get the b file, you can create some very nice play there, right? So just in case, that really makes sure white won't sacrifice the exchange. Whereas here, actually, when I first saw this position, I thought, maybe rook takes b6 is possible. It's still equal after that, but you say, why give your opponent another option? Okay, here you made a draw, and the position is totally drawn, so it makes sense. Yeah, so what stuck with me from this game? Well, obviously, you not implementing the right plan, pushing the pawns forward on the king side, that is certainly the most obvious. And you played a lot of piece moves there with the queen, with the rook, back and forth, not getting anywhere. So for the future, if you have the space advantage, the only way to get through is to push your pawns forward. Yes, your king will be more open, but it's fine because position is closed, so you don't have to worry about your king that much, right? Especially when your opponent played d5. There was just no play he had anymore besides on the pawn on b6, but your knight just defends this effortlessly. So yeah, this definitely stuck with me the most. And there was this one with blunder with queen g6 where he blundered a pawn. Okay, that can happen. Pay attention to your opponent's candidate moves, right? And then the move c6. Like I said, pawns don't go backward. Really think twice about every pawn move you make. And I remember a saying of my coach, my former coach. He said, every pawn move creates a weakness. So it's always like it's a trade-off. By moving a pawn, you leave one square or another pawn unattended and create a weakness there, but in return you take over another square, right? But of course you have to be sure about this trade-off and that it benefits you. And in the case of c6, it didn't, I would say, because as we'll see, as we saw, this knight on d7 didn't move anymore afterwards, and it couldn't really be active in the game because it was just stuck defending one single pawn on b6. So that's not what a knight likes to do. All right, I will check the chat if you had any questions. Doesn't look like. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope you could take something away from it. And once again, thank you for your support, and let me know if you have any questions about this game or anything else, really. Just shoot me an email. All right, I'll drink something. And we're off to the third and last game for today. And it is by Mario Guevara Rodriguez. And he was playing with the black piece against Boris Briefmann. So let's begin. d4, knight f6, bishop 4, e6. Another, well, Nimso setup at least. I like it. And here bishop b4 check. This doesn't help you, right? You're forcing white to play a move that he would like to play anyway, the move c3, and you're just losing a tempo. So just play c5 and so forth. This is the very topical London system, and white will go c3 anyway, so you're just giving him an extra move, right? So I'd recommend you check this out, this whole system, and check what the good players are playing here. For example, you could look at Kamsky against Nakamura, or Giri against So, Wesley So, as one kind of line to play. And look at this, because a lot of people are playing it these days. Okay, bishop d3. Alright, so all natural development moves. I don't have anything to say here, that's all fine. It's all good. A6, queen b1, h6, all makes sense. Takes. And here knight d7, okay, that's possible. But I thought maybe just bishop d6, just exchange this bishop. And if knight f3 now, just take, play knight d7, and really white can't claim anything here. This is just equal. I mean, yes, visually he has the better bishop, but it doesn't count for anything here. You'll just try to get e5 in, and it's just completely equal. So bishop d6 I thought was also possible, but knight d7 is fine, but still you want to get rid of this bishop on g3, as it's really annoying, I think, personally. And a knight on d7 is not that great anyway, so here you could just go back, knight f6. Plan bishop d6 once again. Yeah, just fine, like that. Okay. I mean, also what you're playing is fine, but it seems white has a little bit of pressure. Just a little bit. Rook e8, f4. Okay, now you go f5. Not sure if this is necessary. White has just weakened himself, and this move looks especially odd because it's blocking the bishop on g3, making it kind of bad, right? So maybe you can just go knight f6 here. Because white obviously wants to go knight f3, knight e5. But now if white goes knight f3, you'll put a knight in yourself on e4. And then it's nice to be still flexible with the pawn on f7 instead of f5. Because that means you can still push a knight out of e5 by going f6 at the right point in time. Maybe even here. Why not? So f5 is possible, but it's also quite committal. So not sure if that was indicated here. Okay, here bishop f6. What I don't like is your knight on d7. The knight on d7, it's kind of passive. I want to get to e4, so go knight f6. Just bring it to e4. Yeah, white can put a knight on e5, but you'll also have a strong knight on e4 and asking some questions to this bishop. And notice, by the way, that bishop h4, maybe you were afraid of that, not sure, could be answered by g5 here. F takes, and now knight e4, pinning the pawn on g5 and winning it back the next move. Or well, if white takes an e4, then you'll win it back, certainly. So bishop f6, and it seems you're just like waiting kind of passively. Queen d1, queen e7, queen e2, rook a8, queen f2, and this is an important moment. White has just played queen f2, and I'm sure you thought about what he wanted, to exchange his bad bishop on g3 against your bishop on f6. So this is classic prophylactic thinking. He wants to go bishop h4. Okay, so how do I stop that? I play king h7. And why do I do it? We'll see in the game, because now after bishop h4 you can answer it with g5. Just push the bishop back. In the game you just ignored it. You focused on your own play of bishop c6. But now after bishop h4, now you do have to allow the trade of bishops, which isn't the end of the world either. But it's not why allowed in the first place, right? But instead you play g5 here, and now it just doesn't work. Because of this pin, he took on g5 first, he could also play queen g3 first. A lot of moves do work here. So this is just basic tactics, right? So not sure what to recommend here. I guess just have your whatever you want, 15 minutes, 20 minutes of tactics every day, staying sharp. Because I know obviously you are a player who usually sees these kind of things, but sometimes we overlook it and can really be annoying, obviously, to just almost lose the game in one move, right? So we want to avoid this, and the only way to do this is to stay sharp by solving tactics on a regular basis, preferably every single day, even if it's just 15 minutes or even less. Even if you just solve 5 tactics every day, still it will help, obviously. Yeah, maybe you didn't look for too many moves here. Maybe you were just on like autopilot, thinking, okay, he has to retreat, and just weren't looking at other moves. That comes back to this topic of candidate moves. Taking moves, right? Bishop takes g5 is a taking move. We have to consider it, even if we only take a few seconds to consider, we still have to consider it. And then we'll just check real quick, is there any follow-up? And then we'll see already, oh, queen g3 wins back the piece, wins the pawn. That's bad, so shouldn't play this. All right, queen g7. Now takes. You're down a pawn, but you're doing the best you can to play on. Here, knight f6 looks logical, but I think it would be better to just get the king out of there as fast as possible. You don't want to have the king here on g8, because that's where the position is going to be opened. And you want to have your rooks here, because this is where white needs to break through, right? He needs to somehow get his play going here along with g4. Where else could he do it? I mean, b3, you could maybe even go b5, then just keep it close like that. e4 isn't possible. So you just want to be able to occupy those files so nothing's happening there. So get your king out of the way, I would say. Knight f6, knight f3, rook e7, bishop e8, it's good. Exchanging the knight is also good. And I think you're doing a good defensive task here. Defensive job. But I don't quite know what happened here, because here the game just stops. It says you lost. So I'm not quite sure what kind of game that was. Maybe it was a blitz game and you lost on time. Because I don't think you played this move and resigned. That wouldn't make much sense. And you're still fighting here. I mean, the game is not over yet. Obviously, white is up a pawn, but well, let's say rook takes a6, rook takes b2. You're still fighting. Rook takes e6 isn't possible because of bishop f7. And yes, white is clearly better, maybe winning, I don't know, but he still has to convert it, he still has to show it. So I can't say anything about that. Because I don't know, but obviously if you just threw in the towel here, that would be too early, just too early. Keep fighting till the end. All right, I'm checking the chat if you are there and watching, but it doesn't look like. So Kevin, you're asking why not f5 by white? Well, now I have to find out when. Why not f5 by white? Well, that needs, I mean, the only moment I can imagine must be here when I said knight f6, right? And now f5. Yeah, I mean, I guess white could do this, but I think just bishop d6 is completely fine. If bishop h4, e5 looks quite strong. black. And what else? I think it's fine. I think the white king is weaker than the black king here. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I got the right moment. And Jürgen is asking, is the night mode giving me more elo? Yes, it is. So always turn it on. Alright, so let's sum this game up. What did I notice here? Well, first of all, in the opening, don't give your opponent an extra move, of course, that's not necessary. Then you develop very sensibly and you equalized. And I think it would have made sense to exchange this bishop on g3 early on. And then I think playing more active, getting this knight to e4 made more sense. But this is all, it's minor stuff, right? Where the game was decided was this move g5, more or less. That just brought you in a clearly worse position, and from there on you're struggling, obviously being a pawn down. So this is where you need to focus on, and like I said, to do this is solving tactics, just easy ones, whatever. They don't have to be that tough. Just making sure your mind stays sharp and you spot those things instantly. You spot them within seconds. You'll see g5, you'll see, oh, doesn't work, pin, right? Your mind will just look out for those things automatically, okay? And then in the end, I don't know what happened, why the game ended prematurely, so I can't comment on that. All right, Mario, I hope that helped. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm not sure if you're watching right now, but I hope you can see this analysis soon. And then thank you for sending in the game. All right, folks, this is all I've got for today, just 3 games. I'll just check the chat real quick if there are any other questions. Is this an open chat then? Ian is asking, yes, this is an open chat. Okay. All right. Thank you all for watching, everybody. I hope that was instructive. I hope that was helpful. And I wish you guys all a good night or good evening, I guess, if you're in Germany. And if you're in the US, like Kevin, I think you have the whole day ahead of you, pretty much. Then, well, enjoy the rest of your day, and talk to you very soon. Bye bye.